My name is Jeremiah Williams, 34 years old and living in Boston. I always thought family meant unconditional support until that crisp Tuesday morning when I received my father's letter. The carefully typed words stared back at me. Don't try coming to the family reunion. We're cutting ties. 10 years of building my business, helping my siblings with college tuition, and this was my reward. I texted back one word. Understood. Then I made a call that changed everything. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if family drama keeps you up at night. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in Chicago, where the streets were lined with modest two-story homes and families who worked hard for everything they had. My father, Richard Williams, was a stern banker whose entire identity was wrapped up in his financial success. His suits were always pressed, his shoes always shined, and his expectations for his children were always impossibly high. My mother, Grace, was his opposite in many ways. She had a warmth that could melt the Chicago winter, and she was the buffer between my father's cold ambition and us kids. From my earliest memories, I knew that pleasing my father meant one thing: achievement. Not just any achievement, but the kind that came with numbers attached. A perfect test score. A first-place trophy. A full scholarship. Each accomplishment was met with a nod, perhaps a pat on the shoulder if I was lucky. Anything less was greeted with a heavy silence that weighed more than any criticism could. When I was 16, our family dynamic shattered. My mother was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer, and within 3 months she was gone. I still remember standing at her funeral, watching my father maintain perfect composure, his back straight, his face a mask of appropriate grief. My siblings, Thomas and Amanda, were just 12 and 10 at the time. They clung to me while my father shook hands with bank executives who had come to pay their respects. With Mom gone, there was no buffer anymore. Our house became a place of rigid rules and expectations, a training ground for future success rather than a home. I stepped into the role of surrogate parent as much as I could, making sure Thomas and Amanda had someone to talk to about their day, someone who would attend their school events when Dad was too busy with important meetings. The real shock came 3 years later when Dad announced he was remarrying. Stephanie was 15 years younger than him, a former client from the bank with a background in real estate development. She tried at first with us kids, but it quickly became clear that she viewed us as competition for Dad's attention rather than as potential family members. When I was accepted to college, I made my first real decision against my father's wishes. He had mapped out my entire life. Business degree from his alma mater, internship at his bank, eventual succession into his position. Instead, I chose to study business technology at a school across the country. The night I told him was the first time I saw him lose his composure. "You're throwing away everything I've built for you," he said, his voice cold with disappointment. "Technology is a fad. Banking is forever." "I need to build my own path, Dad," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Then you can pay your own way," his ultimatum was clear. And I did. I worked multiple jobs, took out loans, and graduated with honors despite the financial struggle. During those college years, my relationship with my father became a series of brief, formal phone calls on holidays and birthdays. I came home for Christmas and Thanksgiving, enduring his subtle jabs about my career choice and watching as Thomas and Amanda were groomed to make different choices than I had. After graduation, I launched my tech startup. The early years were brutal. I lived in a studio apartment with a mattress on the floor, pouring every cent into the business. Dad never asked how I was doing, but I heard through Thomas that he often referenced my poor life choices at family dinners I wasn't invited to attend. Then 5 years ago, something unexpected happened. Dad called me directly, his voice unusually cordial. "Jeremiah, I have a business proposition that might interest you." The proposition was a $1.5 million loan for an investment property he wanted to develop. He needed a cosigner with good credit and a growing business to secure the most favorable terms. Despite my success, I was surprised he'd reached out. "This could be good for both of us," he said. and it might be a way to repair our relationship. I should have recognized the manipulation, but part of me still craved his approval. I agreed to meet with him and his banker. I reviewed the documents, signed my name, and hoped that this would indeed be the bridge that brought us closer. For a while it seemed to work. I was invited to occasional family dinners, though they invariably ended with tension. Dad would ask pointed questions about my business metrics, then offer unsolicited advice about what I was doing wrong. Stephanie would change the subject whenever I gained too much of the family's attention. Throughout those years, I maintained my relationships with Thomas and Amanda as best I could. Thomas was in medical school by then, and Amanda had married young and was starting a family. Dad made it clear that he considered himself their primary support, but I made sure they knew they could count on me too. "You know Dad," Thomas told me once. "He likes being the one everyone depends on. It gives him control." I nodded, already understanding this truth too well. "Just remember you have options," I told him. "You don't have to live the life he's planning for you." Little did I know then how prophetic those words would become, not just for Thomas but for all of us. As the years passed, my tech business finally began gaining serious traction. We developed a software platform that streamlined logistics for small businesses, and after years of struggling, investors were starting to take notice. I moved to Boston to establish our East Coast headquarters, a decision my father predictably criticized as running away from family. In Boston, among the historic buildings and vibrant tech scene, I found something else unexpected. Sarah. We met at a charity fundraiser where my company was sponsoring a table. She was there representing her family's foundation, and from our first conversation I was captivated by her genuine warmth and sharp mind. "Tell me about your family," she asked on our third date, her eyes curious and kind. I gave her the sanitized version at first, but Sarah had an uncanny ability to see through my carefully constructed walls. "Families are complicated," she said, reaching for my hand. "But they're also not the only ones who can love you." Sarah came from what seemed like a fairy tale to me. Her parents had been married for 35 years, still held hands and called each other just to say hello. Her brothers teased her but showed up without question when she needed help. They welcomed me immediately, inviting me to Sunday dinners where voices were raised in laughter rather than criticism. "You should try healing things with your family," Sarah encouraged after witnessing one of my tense phone calls with Dad. "Not for them but for you." I tried to take her advice. When Thomas called asking for help with his medical school tuition after Dad imposed conditions on his financial support, I stepped in without hesitation. "Dad says I need to specialize in cardiology if he's going to pay next semester's tuition," Thomas explained, frustration clear in his voice. "But I want to go into pediatrics." "Then go into pediatrics," I told him, transferring the money he needed. "Live your life, not his." Similarly, when Amanda's marriage fell apart and she needed help with a down payment on a house for her and her 2 young children, I was there. Dad had offered to help, but only if she moved back to Chicago and worked at one of his friend's companies. "I can't uproot the kids," she told me tearfully. "Their father is here, their school is here." "Then stay," I said. "I've got you." These acts of support felt natural to me, but they created a complicated dynamic. My siblings were grateful, but our father viewed my assistance as undermining his authority. At the awkward holiday gatherings we still attempted, the tension was palpable. "Jeremiah thinks money can buy family loyalty," Dad commented during one Thanksgiving dinner, swirling his scotch as he delivered the verbal jab. "I think family supports each other without conditions," I countered, noting how Stephanie smirked behind her wine glass. As my business continued to grow, I noticed something troubling. The more successful I became, the more my siblings began pulling away. Thomas stopped calling as often. Amanda's invitations to visit her and the kids became less frequent. "Dad's been helping me set up my new practice," Thomas explained when I finally confronted him. "He's introduced me to all the right people in Chicago medicine." "That's great," I said, trying to sound sincere despite the knot in my stomach. "I'm happy he's supporting your career." But I could read between the lines. My father was reclaiming his position as the family patriarch by leveraging his connections and wealth. The message was clear: loyalty to him first, or risk losing access to his support network. The annual family reunion at my father's lake house had always been a tradition, even during the most strained periods of our relationship. Extended family from across the country would gather for a weekend of carefully orchestrated fun, with my father at the center as the generous host. Last year I brought Sarah, hoping that her natural charm might help smooth some of the rough edges in my family relationships. It was a disaster. Dad dismissed her nonprofit work as playing charity and made pointed comments about her family's old money not understanding real business. When Sarah mentioned her brother's work in environmental law, Dad launched into a tirade about regulations killing American enterprise. Later that evening, I confronted him privately on the dock behind the house. "You were disrespectful to Sarah today," I said, keeping my voice low but firm. "I was honest," he replied, not bothering to look at me. "That's something you'll understand when you've built something that lasts, Jeremiah." "I have built something that lasts. Both my business and my relationship deserve your respect." He turned then, his expression cold in the moonlight. "My house, my rules. If you and your girlfriend can't appreciate that, perhaps next year's invitation should be reconsidered." I left the conversation seething, but determined not to let him drive another wedge in my life. Despite everything, Thomas and Amanda were still my siblings. I wanted to maintain our bond, even if it meant tolerating our father's behavior. I resolved that this year I would attend the reunion regardless of the tension, simply to show my siblings I was still there for them. Little did I know that my father had other plans entirely. That Tuesday morning began like any other. I woke early, went for my usual run along the Charles River, and returned home to shower before heading to the office. The mail carrier arrived just as I was having my coffee, and among the usual bills and business correspondence was a certified letter requiring my signature. The return address was my father's law firm in Chicago. Something about that formal letterhead made my stomach tighten as I tore open the envelope. The letter was typed on heavy cream paper, formal and cold. "Dear Jeremiah, this letter serves as formal notice that your presence at the annual Williams family reunion, June 10-12, is neither expected nor welcomed. After careful consideration, the family has decided to sever ties with you going forward. All previous familial obligations are hereby considered terminated. Please refrain from contacting Thomas or Amanda Williams, as this creates unnecessary distress. Regards, Richard Williams." At the bottom was a handwritten note in my father's precise penmanship. "You've embarrassed this family for the last time." I read the letter 3 times, trying to process what "embarrassed this family" could possibly mean. My company had just been featured in Forbes. I had donated to several prominent charities in Chicago. There had been no scandals, no public missteps. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, calling Thomas first. "Did you know about this?" I asked when he answered, my voice surprisingly steady despite the churning in my stomach. His hesitation told me everything. "Dad said it would be better this way," he finally said. "After last year's argument." "That was between Dad and me, not the entire family. Look, Jeremiah, you've always done your own thing. Dad provides for all of us, his connections got me my residency, he's helping Amanda with the kids' private school tuition now. And you're okay with him cutting me out completely. After everything." Another pause. "It's complicated. I can't risk losing Dad's support right now. The kids' college funds my practice startup costs." I hung up before he could finish, then immediately called Amanda. Her reaction was more emotional but ultimately the same. "I tried to change his mind," she said, her voice breaking. "But he threatened to withdraw the kids' school tuition if I didn't agree. I'm a single mom, Jeremiah. I can't risk their education. I've helped you before, Amanda. You know I would again." "It's not just the money," she whispered. "It's everything. The family connections, the support system. I can't raise these kids alone, and Dad has everyone convinced you're the problem." After hanging up with Amanda, I sat in stunned silence. The realization that my siblings knew about the letter but had said nothing felt like a second betrayal. When Sarah came in from her morning yoga class, she found me still sitting at the kitchen island, the letter in front of me. "What's wrong?" she asked, her smile fading as she saw my expression. I handed her the letter wordlessly. She read it, her face transitioning from confusion to shock to outrage. "This is absurd. Who does your father think he is, speaking for your entire family? And what does he mean you've embarrassed them? You're the most successful one in your family." I picked up my phone and showed her the one-word text I'd sent to my father minutes before. "Understood. That's all you're going to say?" Sarah looked incredulous. "For now," I replied, feeling strangely numb. "What else is there to say?" That night was the first in years where sleep completely eluded me. I lay awake, replaying conversations from the past decade, seeing patterns I'd willfully ignored. How I'd been used financially while being emotionally discarded. How my father had positioned himself as the ultimate authority, the source of all support, ensuring everyone remained dependent on him. Scrolling through social media at 3 a.m., I discovered something else disturbing. Posts from cousins and aunts about the upcoming reunion, expressing excitement about seeing everyone. They clearly had no idea I had been excluded. My father had presented this as a family decision, but it was his alone. "My family has always been there for each other," Sarah told me the next morning, bringing me coffee in bed after my sleepless night. "When my brother lost his job, my parents didn't lecture him, they helped him. When my sister wanted to change careers at 40, we all pitched in for her to go back to school." Her stories highlighted everything I'd never experienced. Unconditional support. Love without leverage. Family without fear. As dawn broke, something shifted inside me. The grief and shock began transforming into something else. Not exactly anger, but clarity. Resolution. "I need to stand up for myself," I said quietly, more to myself than to Sarah. "Not just for now, but for good." Sarah took my hand. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." I nodded, already formulating a plan. For once, I would use what I had learned from Richard Williams against him. The loan documents were stored in my home office, filed away in a fireproof box where I kept all important papers. I pulled them out that morning, spreading the thick stack of legal pages across my desk and reading each clause carefully. I had reviewed them before signing 5 years ago, but now I was looking with different eyes. By mid-morning, I had called Jackson, my company's financial advisor. He arrived at my condo an hour later, concerned by the urgency in my voice. "So your father has cut you off from the family," Jackson summarized after I explained the situation and showed him the letter. "And you want to know your options regarding the loan you co-signed." "Exactly," I confirmed. "I need to understand my rights and responsibilities." Jackson nodded, pushing his glasses up his nose as he examined the loan documents. "As a co-signer, you're equally responsible for this debt, but you also have certain rights. Let's see what we're working with here." What he discovered over the next 2 hours was eye-opening. Not only had my father leveraged the original property to secure additional loans, but he had also missed 2 payments in the past year, something I had never been informed about despite being equally liable. "This could seriously impact your credit rating and by extension your business," Jackson warned, his expression grave. "As a co-signer, these missed payments reflect on you as well." "What are my options?" I asked. "You could request to be removed from the loan. Your father would either need to refinance in his name alone or pay the remaining balance." "How quickly can we make that happen?" Jackson looked surprised. "You want to move forward with this?" "Yes," I said firmly. "My father has made his position clear. I need to protect myself." The process was more complex than I anticipated. First, a meeting with Laura Feinstein, a manager at the bank that held the loan. Her office was all glass and polished wood, a setting designed to convey stability and trust. "Mr. Williams, removing yourself as a co-signer is not a simple matter," she explained, her tone professional but concerned. "Your father will need to either refinance the loan or pay the remaining balance of approximately $1.2 million. I understand, I replied calmly. How much notice does he need to be given? Legally, 30 days is standard, she said, consulting the documents in front of her. But I must caution you, this action could strain your relationship further. I almost laughed at that. The relationship is already severed, Ms. Feinstein. I'm simply responding accordingly. After the bank meeting, I consulted with my lawyer to draft a formal letter explaining my decision. It was straightforward and businesslike, mirroring the tone my father had used with me. This letter serves as formal notice that I am removing myself as cosigner from loan 478-9056, effective immediately. The bank requires you to either refinance the loan in your name only or pay the remaining balance within 30 days. This decision is final and not open to negotiation. Regards, Jeremiah Williams. My finger hovered over the send button for several long moments. This wasn't just about a loan. It was about standing up to years of emotional manipulation and conditional love. It was about finally saying that I deserved better. I pressed send. The email went to both the bank and my father simultaneously. A strange sense of lightness filled me afterward, as if a weight I had carried for years had been lifted. Sarah found me on the balcony, staring out at the Boston skyline as afternoon turned to evening. Is it done? She asked softly. It's done, I confirmed. 30 days and I'm officially free from at least that obligation. She wrapped her arms around me from behind. I'm proud of you. This took courage. Next, I set up an out-of-office email response specifically for messages from my father and siblings. It was simple. I am currently unavailable and unable to respond to messages. For urgent matters, please contact my assistant. Then I turned off notifications for their numbers on my phone. What now? Sarah asked as we prepared dinner together. Now we wait, I replied, surprised by how calm I felt. And I focus on the people and work that actually value me. The first few hours were quiet. I slept better than I had in days, the decision made, the action taken. It was the calm before the storm, but I didn't yet know just how powerful that storm would be. The first voicemail came at 5 a.m., my father's voice tight with barely contained fury. What the hell do you think you're doing? Call me immediately. By the time I finished my morning coffee, there were 7 more messages, each progressively more angry than the last. My father rarely raised his voice, considering it beneath his dignity, but his final message abandoned all pretense of control. You ungrateful little. After everything I've done for you, you think you can just walk away? This family made you. Stephanie's texts were next, a barrage of accusations. How could you do this to your father after all he's done? This is betrayal. Is this because of that girlfriend of yours? She's poisoned you against your family. I read each message without responding, documenting everything as Sarah had suggested. You might need this record later, she had said, and her foresight proved valuable. By noon, a new voice entered the fray. Harold Schmidt, my father's accountant for over 20 years, left increasingly panicked voicemails. Jeremiah, this is Harold Schmidt. Your father asked me to call you regarding the loan situation. Please call me back as soon as possible. This is extremely urgent. Jeremiah, Harold again. I don't think you understand the implications of what you're doing. Your father has significant financial commitments based on this property. We need to discuss options immediately. Jeremiah, please. The bank has already sent formal notification. We need to talk. Your father's financial position is more complex than you realize. That last message caught my attention. My father had always projected an image of unshakable financial stability. What did Harold mean by complex? Thomas called next, his doctor's composure completely abandoned. Do you have any idea what you've done? He demanded without preamble. Dad's furious. He says you could destroy everything he's built. Hello to you too, Thomas, I replied evenly. Yes, I removed myself from a loan I should never have been part of. This isn't just about a loan. Dad says the bank is demanding payment or refinancing. He says his credit is tied up in other investments right now. That sounds like Dad's problem, not mine. How can you be so cold? This affects all of us. What about Amanda's kids' school tuition? What about my practice loan? I paused, finally understanding. So Dad has leveraged himself so completely that he's put everyone's financial support at risk. And you're blaming me rather than questioning why he built such a house of cards. Thomas's silence spoke volumes. Amanda's call came an hour later, tears evident in her voice. Jeremiah, please. The school called today. Dad's payment for next semester hasn't come through. He says he can't help anymore because of what you did. Amanda, listen to me. Dad is manipulating you. There's no way the bank moved that quickly. He's punishing you to get to me. I don't care why. My kids need their school, Jeremiah. Can you help or not? I'll pay their tuition directly, I promised. But Amanda, you need to see what's happening here. By mid-afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Harold again, this time sounding defeated. Jeremiah, I've worked with your father for 2 decades. I've never seen him like this. He's overextended, leveraged that property for 3 additional loans. The bank's notification has triggered review clauses in other agreements. Why are you telling me this, Harold? A heavy sigh came through the line. Because your father won't listen to reason. He's been playing a dangerous financial game for years, using one loan to pay for another. This could bring everything down. I thanked Harold for his honesty and ended the call, piecing together a clearer picture of what was happening. My father, the great financial wizard, had been maintaining an illusion of unlimited wealth by continuously leveraging his assets. My withdrawal had pulled one critical card from the bottom of his house of cards. The calls from extended family started next. Aunt Judith, Uncle Philip, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, all confused and concerned. Your father says you're having some kind of breakdown, Aunt Judith said cautiously. He mentioned Sarah might be influencing you in unhealthy ways. Did he also mention that he formally cut me off from the family? I asked calmly. What? No, he said you were refusing to attend the reunion because of some business disagreement. One by one, I learned that my father had been spinning a narrative about my mental instability, suggesting Sarah was isolating me from the family. The truth was emerging, and it wasn't flattering to Richard Williams. Even more surprising were the calls from my father's business partners. Apparently, he had told them he was bringing me into several ventures, using my company's growing reputation to secure their participation. We were looking forward to working with you, Martin Chambers, one of Chicago's leading developers, told me. Richard spoke very highly of your technology solutions. That's interesting, considering he formally cut ties with me just days ago, I replied. What? He told us you were taking a more active role in family businesses. I was maintaining professional composure at work through sheer force of will. My team noticed something was off, but I kept the details private, focusing on our upcoming product launch instead of my personal drama. The surprise visit came late Thursday afternoon. I was reviewing quarterly projections with my executive team when my assistant interrupted. I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, but your brother Thomas is here. He's quite insistent about seeing you. I excused myself and found Thomas in the reception area, looking both angry and somehow deflated. We need to talk, he said tersely. I led him to my office, closing the door behind us. Before I could speak, he launched into an accusation. You've destroyed everything. Dad's withdrawing his support for my practice loan. The bank called today questioning my financial statements because they're linked to Dad's accounts. And you blame me rather than questioning why Dad built this financial house of cards, I asked calmly. Of course I blame you. Everything was fine until you pulled this stunt. Was it? Were you happy having your career dictated? Having to ask permission for every life choice? Living in fear of having support withdrawn if you stepped out of line? Thomas paced my office, running his hands through his hair in frustration. You don't understand. Some of us can't just walk away. I have medical school debt, clinic startup costs. I understand perfectly. Dad made sure we all stayed dependent on him. It's how he controls everyone. That's not fair. He's helped all of us. With strings attached to everything, I countered. That's not help, Thomas. That's control. Something in my words seemed to penetrate. Thomas sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. The thing is, he said quietly, the bank representative said some things today. About Dad's finances. Things that don't add up. Like what? Like how the property that your loan is attached to has been used to secure other loans. Like how Dad's business expansion was funded with short-term high-interest financing. He looked up, confusion clear in his eyes. That doesn't sound like the careful banker Dad always claimed to be. No, I agreed. It doesn't. And when I asked him about it, he exploded. Said I needed to know my place. That I should be grateful for everything he's done instead of questioning him. Thomas shook his head slowly. He sounded just like he used to with you. There it was. The first crack in the united front against me. The beginning of my brother seeing our father clearly, perhaps for the first time. What if, I said carefully, Dad isn't the financial genius he's always claimed to be? What if he's been keeping all of us dependent to hide that fact? Thomas didn't answer immediately, but the doubt in his eyes told me my words had found their mark. By day 3, the counter on my phone showed 68 missed calls from various family members. Each voicemail, each text message, each email revealed another piece of the puzzle that was my father's financial web. It was becoming clear that Richard Williams, respected banker and family patriarch, had been operating on financial smoke and mirrors for years. The certified letter arrived by courier that morning. My father's lawyer was threatening legal action for intentional financial sabotage and breach of familial obligation. I forwarded it immediately to my own attorney. This is legally meaningless, my lawyer assured me after reviewing the document. Familial obligation isn't a legally enforceable concept, and you acted completely within your rights regarding the loan. This is intimidation, nothing more. When my father finally requested a face-to-face meeting, I set clear conditions. Neutral location, Sarah present, no Stephanie. He agreed with surprising speed, suggesting a level of desperation I hadn't anticipated. We met at a downtown restaurant in a private dining room. My father arrived precisely on time, immaculately dressed as always, but I could see the strain around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. You've made your point, he said without preamble, not even acknowledging Sarah's presence. Now it's time to fix this mess before it goes any further. There's nothing to fix, I replied calmly. I've removed myself from a loan that should never have included me in the first place. Don't be childish. You know exactly what you've done. The bank is questioning all my finances now. They're reviewing every loan, every investment. And that's my problem because... His facade of control slipped just for a moment. Because we're family, damn it. Whatever our differences, you don't do this to family. Family, I repeated, feeling a surge of emotion I quickly contained. You sent me a formal letter cutting ties. You told me not to contact my siblings. You said all familial obligations were terminated. I'm simply respecting your wishes. Sarah placed her hand on mine under the table, a silent show of support. That was about the reunion, my father insisted, his tone dismissive. A cooling-off period, not a complete severance. The letter was very clear, I countered. As was the handwritten note about me embarrassing the family. You brought that girl to the lake house and challenged my authority in my own home. That girl, I said, my voice hardening, is Sarah. And yes, I objected to how you treated her. That hardly justifies cutting me out of the family entirely. For the next 20 minutes, my father alternated between threats and attempts at intimidation. When those failed, he switched to reminiscing about how much he had done for me, how he had always looked out for the family. I let him talk, watching as the careful image he had maintained all these years began to crumble. Finally, I placed a folder on the table between us. What's this? He asked suspiciously. Bank records. Loan documents. Financial statements from the family trust. Things Harold probably wishes he hadn't sent me. My father's face paled slightly. Harold had no right. Harold is worried you're about to lose everything. He thought I might be able to help if I understood the full picture. I opened the folder, turning it so he could see the contents. You've been operating on the financial edge for years. The banking crisis hit you harder than anyone knew. Instead of scaling back, you doubled down, using one loan to pay for another, leveraging every asset to maintain the appearance of success. That's standard financial strategy, he began defensively. It's a house of cards, I interrupted. And the most interesting part. You've been using my business as collateral for some of your recent ventures. That stopped him cold. I never put your business up as collateral. Not directly. But these documents show you've been telling investors and partners that you have a controlling interest in my company. That we have a partnership agreement giving you access to my assets. I was planning to discuss that with you, he said, his confidence faltering. A family business alliance that would benefit everyone. Without my knowledge or consent. That's fraud, Dad. The word hung in the air between us. Fraud. The one thing Richard Williams had always claimed to despise most in the financial world. You wouldn't dare make such accusations public, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. I don't want to, I agreed. Despite everything, you're still my father. But I will if you force my hand. For the first time in our meeting, my father seemed at a loss. The facade of the powerful patriarch was cracking, revealing a man who had been running from financial reality for years. I'm at risk of losing everything, he finally admitted, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. The primary residence, the lake house, the investment properties. One default triggers clauses in other loans. It could all come down. And you've made sure that Thomas and Amanda would fall with you, I observed. By keeping them financially dependent. He didn't deny it. Instead, he tried one last approach. I can still fix this, but I need you back on the loan. 30 days isn't enough time to restructure everything. Once we weather this storm, you can remove yourself properly, with a transition plan. No, I said simply. No, he repeated, as if he couldn't comprehend the word coming from me. This isn't a negotiation, Jeremiah. This is a family emergency. I'm aware. And I'll help, but on my terms. Your terms, his voice rose in disbelief. Who do you think you are? I'm the son you raised to be independent and successful, I replied evenly. The one who built his own business without your help. The one who's now in a position to help the family if you're willing to accept that help comes with boundaries. He stared at me, struggling with the role reversal. When he didn't respond, I stood to leave. Wait, he said, his voice strained. What are your terms? I sat back down. First, a complete accounting of all family finances, transparent to all adult family members. Second, no more using anyone as financial leverage against others. Third, respect for my relationship with Sarah and my independence. You're asking me to give up control of my own financial affairs, he protested. I'm asking for transparency and honesty. If your finances are as precarious as these documents suggest, you need help, not more secrets. He was about to respond when his phone rang. He glanced at it, his expression changing to one of alarm. It's Amanda. He answered, putting the call on speaker at my gesture. Amanda's voice came through, tearful and panicked. Dad, the bank called about the house loan. They said it's connected to some investment property and they're reviewing all your linked finances. They mentioned possible foreclosure if the situation isn't resolved. What's happening? My father looked at me, a silent plea in his eyes. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I saw Richard Williams afraid, truly afraid of losing everything he had built or claimed to have built. Amanda, I said loud enough for her to hear. This is Jeremiah. I'm with Dad now. We're working on a solution together. There was a pause, then Jeremiah. Dad's with you. I thought. There's been a misunderstanding, I said, holding my father's gaze. We're sorting it out. I'll call you back soon, okay? After she hung up, my father sat in silence for a long moment. You didn't have to do that, he finally said. No, I didn't. But unlike you, I don't use family as leverage. Something shifted in his expression then, a reluctant acknowledgement. What exactly are you proposing? A restructuring of the family finances. Transparent, above board, with professional advisors who report to the entire family, not just you. I'll help stabilize the situation, but not by putting my name back on that loan. We'll find another solution. And if I refuse? Then you face this alone. I'll still help Thomas and Amanda, but directly not through you. It was a pivotal moment. For decades, Richard Williams had been the unquestioned authority in our family. Now he was being asked to acknowledge that he needed help, that his way of doing things had created this crisis. I need time to think, he said finally. You have until tomorrow, I replied, standing again. The clock is ticking on that 30-day notice. As Sarah and I left the restaurant, she squeezed my hand. Do you think he'll agree? He doesn't have much choice, I said. But accepting that will be the hardest thing he's ever done. 6 months later, we gathered for what my father still insisted on calling the family reunion, though it bore little resemblance to the formal, tightly controlled events of the past. Instead of his imposing lake house, we met at a neutral location, a rented beach house on the Michigan shoreline where no one person could claim authority as host. The intervening months had been challenging but transformative. My father had initially balked at my terms, attempting once more to maintain control through financial manipulation. It was only when the bank called in another loan triggered by the first review that he finally accepted reality. The family finances were in far worse shape than any of us had imagined. Years of leveraging one asset to acquire another had created a precarious structure that was one missed payment away from collapse. Richard Williams, the esteemed banker who had lectured all of us about financial responsibility, had violated nearly every principle he'd preached. It started after the banking crisis, he admitted during our first family financial meeting, looking older than his 62 years. Many of my investments were underwater. I could have accepted the losses, scaled back, admitted I'd made mistakes. Instead, you doubled down, I finished for him. Taking bigger risks to try to recover. He nodded, unable to meet anyone's eyes. It worked for a while. Then it didn't. With the help of financial counselors, we created a sustainable plan. Some properties had to be sold. The lake house, symbol of my father's success for so many years, was one of the casualties. His primary residence was refinanced on more realistic terms. Most importantly, each family member's financial support was separated and secured independently, removing my father's ability to use money as control. Thomas and Amanda struggled with the revelations at first, having built their adult lives around our father's supposed financial wisdom. I feel like such a fool, Thomas confessed during one of our newly established monthly sibling dinners. I let him dictate my entire career path because I thought he knew best. He didn't know how to project confidence, I offered. We all fell for it in different ways. Amanda nodded, bouncing her youngest on her knee. I can't believe I almost let him uproot the kids just to keep his financial support. When all along he was barely staying afloat himself, I finished. But that's over now. We're making decisions based on truth, not manipulation. Sarah had been my rock throughout the process, offering both emotional support and practical advice. Her background in nonprofit management proved invaluable as we restructured family charitable commitments that had been more about tax advantages than genuine giving. The most surprising development was my evolving relationship with Stephanie. Once my father's financial house of cards collapsed, revealing that even her allowance and spending had been largely smoke and mirrors, she showed an unexpected vulnerability. He never let me see the real numbers, she confessed during a surprisingly candid conversation. I thought we were much more secure than we were. He did that to everyone, I assured her. It wasn't just you. With my father's facade of omnipotence shattered, we were all seeing each other more clearly, perhaps for the first time. Richard Williams was neither the financial genius he'd claimed to be nor the villain I had sometimes painted him as in my mind. He was simply a man who had lost his way, whose fear of failure had led him to risk everything rather than admit vulnerability. The family therapy sessions were his idea, surprisingly. I need to understand why I did this, he said quietly after a particularly difficult financial disclosure meeting. Why I was willing to risk my relationship with my children rather than admit I needed help. Those sessions revealed patterns going back generations. My grandfather, I learned, had been similarly controlling, using financial support as a way to dictate his children's lives. My father had simply perpetuated what he knew, unable to see the damage it caused. My business continued to thrive during this period, securing a major round of funding that established us as a leader in our industry. For the first time, my father expressed genuine interest in understanding what I had built, without immediately offering criticism or unsolicited advice. "You've done well," he said during a tour of my expanded Boston office. "Better than I would have in your position, I think." From Richard Williams, this was tantamount to a standing ovation. Even more meaningful was the bond developing between my father and Sarah. After his initial dismissal of her, he had come to respect her insight and compassion. When we announced our engagement at the new family gathering, his congratulations seemed genuinely warm. "She balances you," he observed later, watching as Sarah chatted with Amanda's children. "Brings out your better qualities." "The way Mom did for you?" I asked carefully. His expression softened, something that rarely happened when my mother was mentioned. "Yes." Grace saw past my ambition to the person underneath. "I lost sight of that person after she died." These conversations about my mother, painful but necessary, helped heal wounds that had festered for years. We were finally acknowledging her absence, the hole it had left in all our lives, instead of pretending that business success could fill the void. One evening during the reunion weekend, my father approached me on the beach. The sun was setting over Lake Michigan, painting the water gold and crimson. "I've been thinking about Thomas and Amanda's education," he said without preamble. "The money you contributed when I tried to control their choices." "That was a gift," I said quickly. "They don't need to repay it." "I know. But I should." He handed me an envelope. "It's not the full amount, but it's what I can manage right now. The rest will come as the new financial plan allows." I was speechless, not because of the money itself, but because of what the gesture represented. My father was acknowledging that I had stepped in where he had failed, not financially but emotionally, supporting our siblings' independence rather than their dependence. "Thank you for not giving up on this family," he added gruffly. "You had every right to walk away after what I did." "Family is complicated," I replied, echoing Sarah's words from years earlier. "But they're also not the only ones who can love you. They're just the ones who get the most chances to try again." He nodded, understanding the boundary within the reconciliation. Our relationship would never be what it might have been without the years of manipulation and control. But it could be something new, something built on honesty and mutual respect rather than power and dependence. As the weekend drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The letter that had seemed like the ultimate rejection had actually been the catalyst for genuine change. By standing my ground, I had forced a reckoning that had ultimately benefited everyone, including my father. Love requires boundaries to be healthy. This was perhaps the most profound lesson I had learned. By removing myself from the loan, I had not been punishing my father but rather refusing to participate in a dynamic that was hurting all of us. True family support uplifts without controlling, guides without dictating, loves without conditions. Standing on the beach with Sarah's hand in mine, watching as my family gathered for one last sunset together, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. The path forward wouldn't be perfect or without challenges. Old patterns don't disappear overnight. But we were facing them together now, in the light of truth rather than beneath the shadow of manipulation. Sometimes families must break before they can truly heal. In our case, it took a formal letter of rejection and a one-word response to begin the journey toward authentic connection. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who couldn't see how their behavior was hurting everyone? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful changes. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage in your own family journey.